Watching the news right now can be stressful as well as confusing. Besides concerns about COVID-19, social distancing, and self-isolation, you may be watching your retirement portfolio shrink and wondering how this will impact your publishing business. This can become an emotional roller coaster. So how do we get off that emotional whipsaw and get you to a place of peace? Well, that's where tip number 3 comes into play. So we're going to talk through how to stress test your business. I call this tip looking into the abyss. What we're going to do is we're going to evaluate your business and what will happen to it in an economic downturn. The way we'll do that is I'm going to show you a tool which you'll then be able to get for free to use. And by using this tool, you'll be able to test your specific situation and understand the impact that different levels of stress will have on your business. So what if you lose 20% of your sales? What if you lose 50% of your sales? Here's the thing to think about when you go through this process. Is it may be uncomfortable because we're dealing with numbers, or that you don't really want to look at what might be the reality of the situation. If you don't look into the abyss, you're not going to understand the gravity of the situation. You may find out that everything's going to be okay. You also may find out that there are certain levels where your business is going to be stressed to the point where you're going to need to make some drastic changes. I've been through a lot of downturns. I can think of 3 or 4 major things that have happened in my lifetime that have impacted businesses that I've owned. And I can tell you this from my own experience: you never make the cuts fast enough, and you never make them deep enough. And you risk endangering the entire business. And if you're self-employed, that means you're risking your personal finances. So I want to help you to get through that stuff. I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm actually trying to get you to be more confident and help you to understand the reality of what we're facing. Now, you may have heard a lot of stuff in the news about how they're pumping all kinds of money into the economy. One of the things that the Fed and the Treasury are very worried about is liquidity. You'll hear that word a lot. We want to make sure that the system has liquidity. They don't want to see things seize up. And really what that is, in its most simplest form, is they want to make sure that cash keeps flowing. You've heard me talk before, the number one thing that wipes out businesses is running out of cash. A situation like we're in, where we have a significant change in how the economy is working, can cause your sales to drop, and then in turn you run out of cash and your business gets in real trouble. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on the computer, and you can look over my shoulder, and I'm going to walk you through this tool, and it's going to help you to understand what's going on in your business today, and then have you test scenarios to understand what you might have to change in the future. So let's get on that right now. So this is the Author Business Stress Test, and you can see at the link here that I'm showing, you can go there and download this spreadsheet. You don't have to give me your email or anything like that. I want you guys to have these tools in your hands and use them to help your business get through these uncertain times. Now, for some of you, this may look familiar. If you have read my book, Treat Your Writing Like a Business, you know you get the coursework with that's included with the book, and the spreadsheets are also included. So this is a derivative of the monthly expense and cash planning spreadsheets. In fact, if you're a member, you can just copy that information and paste it in here and use this really quickly. But I'm going to take the approach that you're not, and you're going from scratch. You're going to be filling this out. So let's get through let's start working through this. So first off, this is based on a cash basis. That means we're accounting for cash when it comes in the door and when cash goes out. For that reason, we have a offset on our revenues. So you're going to plug in your revenues up here, and then they're going to be offset by 60 days because that's typically what we see revenues come in. So for example, you put in $3,000 here, and you see it changes the number in March. Now, because we're starting later in the year, you may have to plug in your January, February numbers, because that would actually be coming from November and December of 2019. So just keep that in mind. So that's going to help lay out your sales and then when the revenue actually hits your business. The next section is expenses. We have it laid out here according to the Schedule C of the IRS 1040 form that is used if you're a sole proprietor. If you have a different categorization system, then go ahead and use that. But we think this is pretty good, and you can just plug in numbers, especially if you don't have any categorization, you're not doing any modeling, just go ahead and use our numbers. But you can also add columns or rows. You can add rows if you need to. But the idea here is to plug in any numbers that you see that you need to change. Get that all set. The last thing you're going to need to input to get an understanding of how this is going to impact cash flow is you're going to need to change the tax rate that applies to you and the cash balance that you may have at the beginning of the start. So if you had at the start of the year you had $5,000 in your account, put that in there so that we know what your cash balance is going to be, because we're really going to focus on what happens in this on your cash balance, making sure that you have the cash to get you through any changes in the business. To actually run the stress test, what you do is you change the number in this box. So right now we have no stress on the business. Your model is as is. But let's say we want to test out a situation where your business has a 10% drop in revenue. It went along and applied that to the whole system. It doesn't change these numbers here. It's going to change it down at the cash level, just so we don't get confused. I've done it that way. And then you can start to see how it plays through in the business down here, in cumulative income and your cash balance. I suggest you try at least 2 levels in your business, one being 20% drop. And we can see that the impact that that's had on our cash flow already. With a 20% drop, we only have $6,200 at the end of the year. So now let's test out a 50% decrease in sales and see what that does to our cash flows. Well, we can see that we're losing money right away, and we burn through our cash to the point that in November and December we're starting to have a negative cash balance. We want to eliminate that. We want to make sure that we don't ever go into a negative cash balance. And that shows us that, this is a point where our business is going to need to look at cutting costs. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go through that process of doing it right now, but understanding how these different levels impact your business. And also, this cash flow needs to be lined up with your monthly cash flow needs if you're in a situation where this is your full-time gig. Now, if you get yourself in a situation where you see that the cash flow is tightening up, there's 2 levels that you're going to be able to evaluate where you can cut costs. There's within the business at the business level, if you're running it as a LLC or an S Corp, or even as a sole proprietor, there's the business costs that you can cut. And then the next level down is what you may have to do to your personal finances to get those in line. But let's look at the business here, that we see that we can immediately look into some areas where we can make adjustments. So we can say, well, we're not going to be using this professional services like we thought we were going to. We'll get that back in line with that $100 level. Oop. And right away we see that our cash flow bounces back, but we're still have an issue of the compounding losses. So we would have to dig in here and find some more things to cut. You get the idea that this is a tool for you to project some financial stress and see what you can do to alleviate it. Now, this isn't a prediction tool. We're not trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. We just want to make sure that whatever the future deals to you, that you know how to react to it and what to do ahead of time. It's important that you don't let these losses build up and get yourself into a situation where you run out of cash. So I hope you found that walkthrough helpful. Again, you can go to joesolari.com and download the spreadsheet you saw me working through, that you don't have to provide an email address. It's not a lead magnet. It's a resource that I'm trying to provide authors to make sure that their publishing business is going to make it through this economic downturn that's coming our way. A big part of having some sanity in our life and to reduce anxiety is looking into the abyss and making sure that we see how bad it could potentially get, and to have a plan if it starts to look that way. Because like I said before, as a business owner that has been through some downturns, the better prepared you are, and the more that you understand what you're going to have to do to make sure that you get through these hard times, the easier it will be for you to do that. Also, please leave comments below on the things that are concerning you right now about your publishing business. This will help me to put more content together for you to address these. Or if you have specific issues that you're dealing with that you need help with, you can either leave a comment and I'll address it there, or you can go to my website, again, joesolari.com, and I do have free time that you can schedule to talk one-on-one with me in confidence about your business. Again, thanks for watching these videos. I hope they've been a help.